Welcome to the SRS Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron J. Babyar, and I'm the Director of Support Raising Solutions. Whether you are a new ministry worker or a veteran looking to increase your competence and confidence, Support Raising Solutions seeks to bless you in your quest to be a spiritually healthy, vision-driven, and fully funded Great Commission worker. My guest today is Mark Wilson. And at the time of this conversation, he is with an organization called Cadence International, which is a wonderful amount of great ministry work to military servicemen from the U.S. all over the world. However, I say at this time because we're intentionally actually doing this podcast recording right now as he is in transition. And so it just so happens to be that he is in transition to Support Raising Solutions. We're going to be welcome him to our team in the near future. And in the meantime, there's some things that he has to do. And I just said, hey, Mark, I want to interview you kind of in the middle of your transition time, because I get this question quite a bit at boot camps and other times where people say, hey, I'm changing organizations. Am I going to lose all my supporters, or what do I got to do to keep my supporters? Or they ask this question after they've made the transition and they've lost a bunch of supporters. And so, Mark, man, I really appreciate you, first of all, just being willing to come on in the middle of all this craziness going on and joining us today. So welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Thanks, Aaron. What a privilege to get to be on this and to share our experience. And, the Lord bless it. Hopefully it will be helpful to some people as they get a little peek into what we're working on right now.
Yeah, I imagine it will be. Well, as we step into this, go ahead and give us a brief minute or two introduction to you, a little bit about your family and a little bit about your ministry history to this point that is where God has led you to actually step into becoming the managing director of Support Raising Solutions.
Kathy and I have always had a passion for equipping other people. And so it didn't matter where we were at in ministry, it was what we did. And so for a long time, 20 years, we were in the youth ministry part of the ministry world. And so we spent a lot of time investing in volunteers, mobilizing student leaders. And eventually that led us to leading and mobilizing other youth workers. And so that's just always been what we've loved and done. We did 15 years of that in Germany with military kids and youth pastors over there who worked for Cadence. We spent the last 8.5 years in Denver working at the Cadence headquarters. And so all three of our kids have consular birth abroad, a birth certificate. So they were all born in Germany. And so we've got a freshman in college, we have a junior, and then we have a seventh grader. So we are right in the middle of the teen years. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but how it got us to where we are now. I mean, we just have always had that passion to help people get better at what they do and participate in the Great Commission. And some of the ways we were hoping that would happen, there just weren't some of those options available in Cadence. And through a strange and sort of tangent series of events, we got connected with SRS, and the more they talked about the way they think about mobilizing people to the Great Commission and how SRS, Support Raising Solutions, is a part of that, we just were really enamored with the vision and thought, boy, this is something we could see ourselves investing the next 20 years in, is helping people get to the field better, be funded better, be more theologically sound in the way they think about support raising. So that's a real nutshell of who we are.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, Mark, for the sake of our listeners, I want to capture the organized chaos that you're living in right now. You are about to move from where to where physically. Meanwhile, you are changing organizations and you're needing to connect with supporters. So there's a lot going on, and I'm sure that there are supporters I'm sure there's some listeners that they're listening to this, that they're about to have that happen to them, or they're already having that happen. So I just want to illustrate how you're walking the walk and talking the talk here. You're in the middle of it all.
Yeah, you're right, Aaron. We've been support raising missionaries for 23 years. And so currently we have been assigned to the Cadence headquarters in Denver, Colorado. And we have accepted the position with the Center for Mission Mobilization. And we'll be moving to Fayetteville, Arkansas. And the goal is to have all of our launch funds and our support in by the end of December this year so that we can be there in January. So we are in the middle of transitioning everyone and everything and moving our kids out of school and putting the new systems. All that is happening right now.
Yeah. So that's a new geography. That's a new financial change potentially on a practical level, but even on a organizational level, you're going to be asking your supporters to change the destination of their giving funds. Meanwhile, you're looking at new grocery stores to shop in and new houses to live in, and so you are very much in the thick of it. And I'm not trying to put any extra pressure on you that you're not already feeling, but within all that, and this is why we wanted to talk to you today. You're definitely someone that is experiencing something that's not new. It's new to you. It's unique. It's hard, but we know that it happens. Sometimes there are people that are very much called to ministry, and God has blessed them, and they've raised their full support, and they're living in ministry on that full support. And at some point, God has redirected them. And I know that I experienced something similar many years ago, not totally the same as your situation, but I do remember thinking, man, this is hard. Wow, this is hard. And even trying to follow up with some supporters and go, well, how do I get them to not stop giving, but then also they're hard to get a hold of, and I need them to continue to give, but I need to give them information so they can get them to give somebody else. But then they're not just going to do that. That I got to get them information. Oh, this is hard. So anyway, let's just dig into that a little bit. As you've been thinking about some of the different things that have to change, let's just talk through a few angles of that. First of all, tell us about your family. What's going on with them, or is there full buy-in there? I'm assuming. Give us a little more backdrop on that, and then after that, if you would start telling us a little bit about the organization that you're moving away from in that transition.
Yeah, so we have 2 girls and a boy, and our son is in the middle. So we have Abby, who's 18, and Samuel, who's 16, and Moira, who's 13. And I don't know, for whatever reason, the Lord put a passion in our heart that we should include our kids in all of our ministry decisions in terms of location, where we are. And so when we moved from Germany to Denver, we talked with the kids and said, hey, we're well in advance. And so just included in our prayer life, we did let them emote about their sadness, about what would be different. We tried to highlight new adventures. And so that's true here too. And so about 4 months before we decided to leave Cadence, we engaged with our kids and said, hey, we feel like the Lord is saying this to us. Would you pray with us about this? Would you talk with us about this? And so I think, again, that was our family's model. And I know that might, depending on your kids' personalities and your situation, may or may not be a good thing.
Yeah, but I want to affirm you in that. And you and I actually did have this conversation a few months back. I have a family member that their internal, so it's not immediate, but their internal family years ago, and they just went through a time of change, and it was for ministry. And I don't recall all the exact timing, but I do know that there were kids similar in age to your kids, and this extended family member of mine wasn't consulted. The parents just made the decision, and literally they were pulled out of school before their senior year. They were moved across state lines into a new community, and there was some real hurt from all that. It wasn't something that the family prayed through and talked through together. It was an announcement that was made from on high. And man, I'm just so thankful that you're navigating this well with your kids. I think, your family is your first and most important ministry, and I'm impressed that you are doing that. And so that I already knew that. That's one of the reasons I asked you that question, because I'm doing some of that stuff, because far too often I've heard the other side where kids have felt like mom and dad are going to do whatever they want to do, and we're along for the ride because we happen to have the same last name. Yeah,
and we have a firm belief that these challenges, because my son is going to move before his senior year, and we just want to make sure that he has the opportunity to engage with us to the Lord, and then see the Lord meet his needs in this new school, this new community. And and that's true for my other kids too. But but specifically for him, I think the challenge will be the hardest. But we really firmly believe by inviting the kids in, they get a chance to see that God really cares about their circumstance and that he's not just some guy that is dictating to his parents who are dictating to him. And
Right.
he really has their benefit in mind too. And we'll see. I mean, this story is not done being written, is it?
Sure.
One of the other things we're doing, Aaron, too, is we're actually coming to Fayetteville, and we're going to take our kids for a preliminary visit so they can see that they can be a part of our house decision and a part of, just seeing where they're going to go to school. And we're hopeful that those things will, either inspire or it'll cause a variety of emotions, I'm sure. Because we're moving from a city of 2.5 million people to Fayetteville, which is 85 or 86,000 people
Right.
as of 2017. So,
Right.
but yeah.
But we have SEC football teams that come through here and beat us up on a regular basis. You can see championship football in all its glory just from the wrong end of the spectrum. But anyway, yeah, I know you guys got a lot going on, and I appreciate that and the process you're through. But having your kids pray about your support and praying for the transition and being aware of all of that is, I think it's significant. I think it helps build faith in our kids and even helps them think about the future and perhaps their call, if God is so leading them into some sort of vocational full-time ministry and how to do what mom and dad did, how to follow that model. But let's do transition into talking a little bit about the communication process with the Cadence International, which again, I'm a fan of. It's a good organization, but as you shared before, you started sensing some desires to serve in ways that Cadence doesn't serve. That doesn't mean that Cadence is a bad ministry or they're not a part of the Great Commission, but for your calling and for kind of the next step in your ministry career, for the days that God's given you here on earth, you were sensing it was time for a change. Tell us about how that went from your angle and how you tried to carefully and respectfully approach the organization to make them aware that was in process.
In the beginning, we just things kept coming to mind, and there was this dissatisfaction, maybe discontent, and it didn't matter how much I prayed about it, how much time I got healthy, I exercised, it just wasn't going away. And whatever it wasn't life-giving. And it was really perplexing. And so we started by seeking some counsel that was not connected to Cadence. We got some good advice from a pastor who said, hey, everybody is in Cadence, so they think about things with a Cadence perspective. You need to get to talk to somebody who doesn't, they're thinking about you, they're not thinking about Cadence. And so that was super helpful. So we engaged really carefully and really privately with some folks, and it really affirmed that what we were experiencing was legitimate, and it wasn't just some dysfunction in our heart or immaturity or it really wasn't an external process that was being pushed on us. Right. And so the next step for us was, then I had a great boss. His name was Matthew, and he just was super safe and really careful and very candid. And I just said, hey, Matthew, this is what we're thinking. What do you hear there? What do you see? What do you suggest our next steps be? And so he was very helpful in the process. And so that was just a conversation between he and I. And then he suggested, hey, let's go talk to our president about your situation. And so we started a dialogue about some of the things that we were dreaming in our hearts, some of the things we wanted to see. Were there opportunities for us to do those things inside of Cadence? And so we met probably twice a month with the president, for about 3.5 months, just to work through it. And in the end, it just became clear as we had a process and a conversation that the things that were stirring in us they just weren't available, or it wasn't maybe even the right timing or my role in Cadence to implement some of those things. And so that gave us permission to move forward.
If you get to help others as they're raising their support, a fair question to consider is, who's helping you? Who's pouring into you and helping you increase your capacity and ability as a support-raising leader, trainer, or coach? May I suggest that you be sure that you're a part of the SRS network, because it can be a matter of access. Access to a discount to the Support Raising Leaders Conference, access to the online course SRS Foundations, and access to the SRS Network member resource page. The SRS Network is designed to resource you and connect you with others who are also trying to develop support raisers for the Great Commission. Make sure that you are a part of the SRS Network.
So it wasn't a, hey, somebody hurt my feelings, I'm going to quit and go to this other ministry over there.
No.
It was an intentional process of really sober-minded prayer and conversation and seeking the Lord and seeking wisdom of others.
Absolutely. And we really made every effort to stay. I mean, it wasn't like we weren't just doing a one-off and, and your feelings get hurt in ministry, and you got to get over it. Right. And so these were just, again, like you said, more long-term, that probably even value and core principle differences that were coming to light that we just couldn't ignore.
Right. Well, in the middle of all this, by God's grace, you've been invited to become the managing director of Support Raising Solutions, which is something I'm thrilled about. I know that's going to probably cause some to go, well, Aaron, what are you going to do? I'm still involved. I'm going to be just more a continued focus on training director. That's still my heart and my passion for equipping ministry leaders to survive and thrive. So I'm not planning on stopping doing the boot camps or stopping doing the podcasts or the webinars I do with organizational leaders or anything like that. I'm not planning on jumping ship at all. I'm very much welcoming you on board, Mark. But I know that you got this invitation and you accepted it. And so now all of a sudden you have some goals to move physically, but also organizationally, but also to communicate with your supporters and to get them on board because they're your team that's praying for and partnering with you. So what have you learned, at least initially, that you really needed to handle ASAP?
Yeah, I think we had a real conviction as soon as we got to that place with the president of Cadence that he needed to let the leadership team and the board know. But the second group that needed to know was our donors. Okay. So that was so he got all the important people in Cadence notified of our decision. And then we had a date. And so we started communicating with them. We just, and we just shared all the things we loved about what God did in us and through us at Cadence. And then we said, hey, look, we're not sure because we actually didn't know what the next step was. This was probably April timeframe, and we didn't know, we didn't have a decision until October. So there's a lot of gray period in there. Yeah. And so we just say, hey, look, we want you to stay with us and help us discern this. We want your input. We want you to keep giving. Help us discern this next step. And not everybody takes that opportunity, but I think what I was trying to say I learned is that communication was super important to keeping a majority of these people on board and just helping them not be in the dark. And I think people tend to feel, you can over communicate, but I think it's way better than under communicating and not knowing. And so that was one thing. One of the other things that I learned is when we were moving over, all of a sudden I'm in a new organization and I don't know the history. I don't know the core values. I don't know. There just were a lot of things I had to relearn because people would ask questions. Hey, what's the governance in your organization? How does your board function? I didn't know any of that stuff, and right. So I quickly had to engage with different people at CMM and say, hey, tell me about this. I have somebody asking, or even simple things like, what's your tax ID number? Because I had some donors. Yeah, but you just got to learn it. And because we'd been in Cadence so long, that stuff was just assumed and rote at this point. Because I could wake up out of a deep sleep and tell you the history of Cadence, but I didn't know that.
Right. We'll continue on, but let me just interject something real quick here. You've referred a time or two to CMM, and just for clarity for someone listening that might be a little confused, the Center for Mission Mobilization is based out of Fayetteville, Arkansas. It's a mobilizing missions organization, and it has teams in many places throughout the world. But the home base is in Northwest Arkansas, which is not too far from where I live. And Support Raising Solutions is technically under its umbrella. So there are times where SRS acts, I don't want to say autonomously, but it almost seems like this whole different organization, but it's not, because we have a fantastic team of people within the Center for Mission Mobilization that completely contribute to a lot, from the editing of this audio to the artwork you see on the websites or in our workbooks for the boot camp. So SRS is not like this own separate entity that's just out there. We're a part of the Center for Mission Mobilization, which I'm thrilled to partner with, and have been for years. So any references to CMM, that's kind of what we're talking about. And SRS. So SRS and CMM, I realize that's a lot of letters, but they're kind of synonymous for the sake of our conversation. So
yeah. And even as you guys listen, like you can tell, I'm still learning how to communicate about CMM and SRS and who's connected. And I made some assumptions there, but yeah, like you said, so like I really am in the process of learning about the organizations that I work for.
Yeah. Okay, so you're moving forward. You're beginning to realize, I got to get some language. I got to understand some history. What else have you learned that you needed to handle a little bit sooner than later? And maybe that even comes down into how you're communicating some of this.
I mean, just even the simple things like, do we have a donor page that people can give to? Do I have signature blocks, business cards? Like I had several donors like, is this SRS even a real organization? And they had never heard of it before. And so I needed some legitimacy behind our transition. Several people said, does it have a 503C? And so there just was some of those tangible, we call it collateral and cadence, but PowerPoint slides, a real newsletter, donor tear-off slips. I just had to generate all of that stuff that was, kind of handed to me, and find out who to talk to and how do I get my email set up. And
you're talking about time too, right? I mean, this stuff took time. I mean, even getting the email set up, you can pick your email address or it can be picked for you, but who's the person that pulls the trigger to make sure that happens, so that you have something legit that you can turn around and email your supporters and go, hey, this is Mark, this is my new email, or all that kind of stuff. That stuff takes time, doesn't it?
It sure does. I mean, and getting, and we really couldn't move forward. Like I had to wait a week or two on the email template for MailChimp. And, like you said, so it does take time, but I didn't want to get out in front of my resources, because I think you only get a couple shots to tell people, look, hey, I'm organized. This organization has its act together. And so you really want to make sure you have a lot of that stuff. But it did delay our support raising launch probably by 2.5 to 3 weeks. And even simple things like we used Office 365 at Cadence, and SRS CMM uses Gmail as their platform and all of the Google products. And so just learning that whole different environment, it wasn't a big deal, but it was different.
Yeah. It's kind of like you can use a Windows computer if you use to a Mac, but you're not so quick with it initially.
Yeah. And so just to your time comment, it wasn't terrible, but it really is it's a preparation period that you have to have. Even though you want to go raise support, I really feel like I needed all this stuff before I got out. And I was having some conversations, but they were very safe, like low-hanging fruit kind of conversations.
Exactly. Yeah. But for that mass stuff, you're better off. Granted, you want to make sure that trains come down the tracks, but you're better off taking a beat and making sure that the first thing that you really communicate en masse is clear. That it's clear about the vision. It's clear about the change. You want your giving links, working when somebody clicks on it. You want to have your artwork right, your email right, and it's worth waiting a beat. It's worth waiting. I guess in your case, it was about 2.5 weeks before sending out mass stuff, to make sure that people are ready. Conversely, Mark, there's a family that years ago, they went through a boot camp, one of the first ones that I did back in, I think it was early 2014. And somehow I got on their email newsletter list, and I've always just kind of kept up to them just a little bit. I don't even think they're aware. They moved to Thailand, but they were one of the very first people that I got to help train in being spiritually healthy, vision-driven, and fully funded. And I think the wife took my email and stuck it on their newsletter list. So I've just always held on to it. And so I get a newsletter from them every now and again, and they have went through a process recently that is somewhat similar to yours, but unfortunately has been a lot more messy, a lot less organized. And I've lost track, but I want to say that I've gotten, 4 to 6 kind of SOS emails that's intended for their supporters. That's like, hey, this month can you give this way, and maybe hopefully next month you can give that way, and we're waiting on this and pray for that. And there's a part of you that goes, hey, I get it. You want your prayer supporters really on your team and praying. But in fairness, they also looked really disorganized. They looked like they didn't really know what they're doing, and they probably do know what they're doing. I picked up on that. They're pretty astute, but they looked like they didn't know what they were doing, and that was just kind of a bad look that unfortunately could potentially cause a supporter to go, you know what, it doesn't look like they know what they're doing. I don't know if I want to partner with them anymore. I don't think I'm going to give in that direction. They're done with that other organization. I think I'm done with them. Now I'm hoping and praying that doesn't actually happen to this couple, but it does beg the point that you already made of get your stuff together. Get organized with the collateral, as you said. Get all those little details together before you go into kind of a mass communication campaign. Well, Mark, what else have you learned, or where are you at right now in the grand scheme of things? Please don't share with us what your salary is going to be or anything like that. But I know you're certainly running into some significant moving costs, as well as I imagine that there has been some salary changes and maybe a couple people that aren't able to stay with you. So you don't have to go into all those details, but tell us, if you would, how much more are you needing to raise? And but also tell us a little bit about the launch cost to actually pull that off. And if you want to be general and not specific, that's just fine with me. But help us understand kind of what you're looking at in a real practical dollars and cents sort of way.
Yeah, sure. So, our support figure for SRS is only about $1,000 a month higher than our support figure for Cadence.
Okay.
And so there really isn't a big transfer. But what the big difference is at Cadence, the headquarters missionaries are sometimes subsidized, and so they covered my healthcare. So even though the number of total support was about the same, the healthcare here in Colorado is fairly expensive, almost double what the CMM figure is for healthcare in Arkansas.
Okay.
So we're actually having to raise, I would bet, probably about $4,000 a month more than we have now, and so that's a pretty good chunk, especially in about 90 days. I mean, you can do it. I mean, but yeah. So and then probably, I mean, we're getting moving quotes anywhere from $10,000 to $17,000 to move a family of 5, 800 miles. So there's a large chunk, and then we're really trying to build a nice buffer, and then some other launch fund costs for some equipment. And obviously there's going to be there's just a whole bunch of things when you move that you can't actually write them all down because you don't know that they exist yet. So we're trying to make sure we have. So we're probably looking, in the $23,000 to $25,000 range to move and get set up. So that's pretty. It can feel pretty daunting.
Yeah. Now, as you have realized this is true, we've talked in this SRS boot camps about you can build your team over time in breadth and in depth. So practically that means is there's some people that you might want to invite to do more to increase their regular gift, and meanwhile you might actually add new people to your team. What's been your strategy, or are you doing both? Tell us a little bit about that and how that's going.
Yeah, and so our strategy has been this. We are trying to, I've heard somebody say people who are on your team already have the door open. So you go there first. And so we have purposely targeted for the last 3 weeks all of our existing donors. And so, I have used every kind of platform on the planet to get a hold of people. We've tried to meet. Many of them are scattered around the country. So we live in Denver, but our support bases are Minneapolis, Indianapolis, and Maryland.
What do you have against warm weather, man?
I don't know, man. It's where the people who love us live, apparently.
Okay.
But we've done tons of Skype phone calls. And so the goal for us is at the end of November to have enough support in to go on benefits and pull a paycheck. Because our last paycheck from Cadence was October 31st. And so it gets real, and it's a good motivator. And so it also helps our donor team, if they can see the vision, they can feel the urgency, and they have an opportunity to consider the vision and decide if it's something God wants them to give to. And so in the process, that's been our primary thing, is to move them over, because we could get a minimal paycheck, still pay the bills, and have the healthcare we need by just moving over the team we have now. And then but that won't work long term. So the next step is Kathy and I have a list of about 65 people here in Denver that they've been our friends for 9 years. And so that's and so I'm doing mostly current donors, but I contact 3 or 4 of those new folks a week too. And so we're starting to build. And once we get through that whole list of current donors and they've all made a decision, then we're going to completely work on the new team. And that'll be after Thanksgiving through all the way through December. We'll be working on that new base and building the team. Okay. And then what you say in breadth and depth there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. That's a good strategy. And I'm guessing if you are what I think is normal, and I could be wrong, there's going to be a point where some of that's going to start crossing platforms of breadth and depth, meaning there's going to be people that you've invited to do more, and for whatever reason, you've just not been able to connect with them. Like you wanted to, you intend to, you think they might, but you haven't been able to get in the same room. You haven't been able to sit down and explain better. And you don't want to do that ask necessarily via email. You want to go back to your supporters and invite them to partner with you, perhaps at a greater level. But that's a face-to-face thing. That's not an email or newsletter thing. And so sometimes you just run into people not being available on your time frame. So I just got a feeling that you're probably going to be doing a little bit of both, the newbies, if you will, and the old steadies, if you will. I think you're probably going to be sitting down with a lot of both as you move past the dates that was in your head and on your calendar.
Yeah, I mean, and you're right. Some people, for whatever reason, they haven't responded, but they're really in the minority. I mean, right now, we're looking at about a 70 or 80% response rate. So I'm reaching out on some platform, whether WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, email, texts, even written letters, and we're getting a good response. But there is a group of people who are not responding. Right. And so I just keep trying a new platform until I get a hold of them at some point. And then we do want to talk and say, look, this is what we're excited about. This is why we're excited about it. This is where we envision you being a part of it. But you're right, that it can be a little frustrating. And I think we had one church for financial reasons. They said, look, hey, we just can't keep supporting you. So we're going to split. And then I had one guy say, hey, we're going to go and contribute to something else we're excited about. So I think I've had 4 people that we've talked to in 3 weeks. We've talked to dozens and dozens of folks. So again, that ratio has been very positive in my mind. And again, you want to bless people and thank them. And
oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and they've been great. That church we estimated gave us $54,000 over the last 10 years. That's awesome, right? And and we're sad that they're in a spot, but you got to trust the Lord with that income replacement. And so,
right. And in the aggregate, you might lose some people. And that's one of the things that I think it's important we do point out. So I appreciate you picking that up. Is the reality is God may have called some people to your team for a season and they're not going to stay with you.
Yep.
If you don't do your part and communicate about what's going on, I can almost guarantee you they won't stay with you. But if you're being faithful and communicating the vision change and the thankfulness of the partnership and how you're seeing God change lives into the future, in the aggregate, you're going to win. You're going to pick up people, and you're going to have people that are on your team that go, yeah, you know what, we've trusted you for, we'll say 5 years, Mark, and you guys are great, and the ministry is great, and yeah, we'd be happy to jump up from 100 to 150 a month. Thank you for asking us. I'm sure you've had some of those conversations already. In fact, would you mind, you can leave out the names, but could you tell us a short narrative about how one of those actually went?
So we've had several, and one of them, my friend who lives in Minnesota, said, hey, so you're going to have to raise more support for this position. I said, yes, we are. And he goes, great, we'll consider that. I didn't even ask him. He just voluntarily did it.
Wow.
It was super easy.
That everybody was that forward thinking.
Yeah. So that was the first one that came to me. I was like, thank you, Lord, for that easy, low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
And I've got a guy, he has been a friend of ours. He was in our ministry in Germany. And we just, as we were talking to him, I said, would you consider increasing your giving because of our greater need and I believe the greater Great Commission impact that we're going to be having through this new position. And so he's considering, and we've also said, hey guys, we have some outfitting needs. Could you consider, and what's amazing is I would say, out of the 7 or 8 conversations where we've specifically asked people about our launch funds, they've all said, yeah, we'll consider. And so I've been blown away by just people's gracious response to consider and pray about it. And a little side note too, one of the things I noticed in our support raising as we were at Cadence, I wasn't as excited about what I was doing. And I think that comes out when you're trying to invite people to your team. And what I do notice right now is I'm really excited about this next opportunity for us. And it shows in our support raising.
Yeah.
Because the excitement overcomes the fear or the dread. And it's just, we are excited about the ministry. And I do want people to be a part of it. And I think it's easier when you're really thrilled about what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, we're excited with SRS to have you stepping into leadership too. It's, I think God has blessed so much with this organization and those of us that get to work within it. But I also believe that there is a new day coming where we're going to be able to continue to help leaders globally in an increased fashion. There's clamoring for that. There's those that want it. We want to provide it. And so I'm excited that you're stepping in with that as part of your focus. So, well, Mark, I want to just kind of defer to you kind of one more time and just say, hey, what is there any final kind of words of wisdom or something that you gleaned recently that you would want somebody to keep in mind as they're kind of stepping into that fray of transition? It might be very much God ordained, beautiful, wonderful transition, but you and I both know it's not easy, particularly if you're actually changing 501c3s and organizations. So any extra words of wisdom that is kind of a closing information you might want to share?
Yeah, I think as you start to look at your organization, your process communicating to your current organization will be really dictated by the culture they have. And so, before you jump in and start communicating, evaluate how has the organization dealt with people who have moved on. And I think that, if you can think of 3 or 5 of them and just kind of observe, you don't need to engage with them, but you can see how the process went well or didn't go well. Or, I had friends say, man, if I told my president that I was thinking about leaving, I'd be shown the door that day. Well, that was a really different culture than I lived in. Yeah. And so I just would say, really, just observe. And Cadence does a great job handling people on the way out. They're thankful for the partnership. They're sad that you're moving on. But I think that's, and if, you may have to be more careful than I did, do they have a replacement for you? They didn't have a replacement for me. So they needed me for another 4 or 5 months. And so I think there were some things like that made my situation pretty ideal. So I just want to throw that out, that just be careful, consider all those things, do seek counsel. And then the support raising thing, there'll be things as you've transitioned that you've forgotten. Sure. You have done it a certain way. You haven't relaunched the ministry again. And I think be prepared to learn again, set low expectations. I think, you've heard that phrase, the difference between expectations and reality is disappointment. And I think just remembering, like you're going to remember all the great parts about support raising. You might forget the hardship, and maybe not. You could be one of those people that like support raising was hard, but I think that'll help So when somebody that's a 23-year donor says, hey, we're going to move on to another ministry, you have already thought through people are going to say no. And so it'll help you recover a little emotionally, I think better and quicker, but just manage those expectations well. And I think involving Kathy and I talked about, because we had opportunities to go into church ministry in a salaried position. And we, as a family, I said, look, Kathy, I don't want to do this if you're not going to do it with me. And it wasn't that she was saying, I just was asking her to partner with me. And she was all in, and loves the CMM SRS. And that to me was, again, a big movement forward that my wife was going to do this with me. And that has it just makes it so much more enjoyable to me to have a partner. And I know for some of you folks that are single, that might not be something, but it could be that there's somebody that you need to have on your side that, just has your back. And I think that's a great thing to have as you move in transitioning.
Good word. Well, Mark, thank you again for taking the time out in the busy schedule you're in right now of refortifying your support team. And again, looking forward to having you step into SRS as the managing director in the very near future. And it's definitely our prayer that God will bless you as you continue to seek to be spiritually healthy, vision-driven, and fully funded yourself. So thanks again for your time today, my friend, and God bless you.
Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us for this episode. We would love to hear your ideas for future content. Please visit supportraisingsolutions.org/feedback to share your thoughts and questions. Also, wherever you download your podcast from, be sure to subscribe for future episodes and come back each week to gain more insight into the process of building and maintaining your personal support team.